Thank you for joining us today. You are watching Talking Points, Ask Me Anything. My name is Paige, and I'm here with Talking Points. I am here every Thursday at 4:30 Central, 5:30 Eastern on Facebook and YouTube. So if you use Talking Points or you're interested in Talking Points or you just want to talk about anything family engagement, you have come to the right spot. And this week's episode is composing the right message. My stuff in the background is coming through, but just ignore that. So composing the right message. And that means that I want to talk today about a little thing I like to call understandability. So we're going to talk about composing the right message within your Talking Points account, and honestly, composing the right message to send to a family in any way that you're sending. And Talking Points just happens to be the way that I would send it, and the way that allows you to send the most understandable, the most accessible, the most equitable message that you can send to all families to reach them all. So we can get started now. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, I am here to answer those questions. So you can drop them in the comments now, and I'll answer them either throughout our conversation or at the end during our FAQ time. And we will get to those later. If you are joining or watching this later after the live stream, then you can still drop questions in the chat. I'll see those and answer them throughout the week. And then we do our live stream, like I said, every Thursday on Facebook and YouTube at 4:30 Central. So let's get started with our conversation about understandability. So that might be a term that you've never heard, or you've heard it and you're not quite sure what it means. So let's talk about what the term understandability means when we talk about it in reference to sending messages and sending content to families. So understandability means that we're not just sending announcements to families based on whatever pops in our head and sending it the way we would say it out loud, typing it out real quick and sending it out. Understandability means that we're taking into account all of the ways a family member, a contact, whoever it is that we're talking to, could interpret that information, all of the things that come into play when they're interpreting that information, whether it's the language they speak or read, or the level of literacy that they have, whether they're going to need to read that information or listen to it, or speak back into it if they're responding, and what terminology we use. If we're educators and we want to throw in all of our acronyms, maybe it's the right time for that, maybe it's not. Thinking about the tone, all of these things are elements of understandability. And those things go into whether or not all of the families you're reaching out to are going to comprehend and be able to engage with the message and the content that you send out. Because really, Talking Points isn't in the announcement business. We're not in the reminder business. We are in the family engagement business, which means we want the content you send out and the messages you send out to be content that families can meaningfully engage in. They can respond to, they can read and understand completely, they can ask questions about. And so this concept of understandability is super duper important. So let's break it down into the smaller parts that are super important and talk about how the Talking Point solution helps with each of those parts. So first, language. I know that that is the highest priority for understanding when it comes to a lot of the information that we send out to families in schools. I know that a lot of schools have translators and interpreters on staff. And when you use Talking Points to translate your messages, we translate currently in 150 plus languages for the messages that you send out and the announcements that you send out. And so translation and getting messages to families and to students in their preferred language, in their home language, is going to be the first important piece of understandability, because if it is in a language that is unfamiliar to them, or even that is that they're not quite literate in, a small misunderstanding could really throw off what it is you're trying to communicate to families. And it could cause discomfort. It could make families not quite trusting. It could make a situation where they're not comfortable to reach out for more information because they see that they're not getting it in their preferred language. So the very first step Talking Points takes is using our enhanced translation system to translate all of those messages into each individual contact's preferred language. And if you want to see how our translation solution differs from other ones that you've most likely used, I'm going to put that link in the chat, because that is a big part of making sure that all the families understand what it is that you're reaching out about. So click that link if you want to dive into really the difference of Talking Points translation with the other ones that you might be familiar with. The second part of understandability that is important when thinking about composing the right message is literacy level of who it is you're speaking to. So a lot of times you're going to be sending a message to multiple families or students, or even just to one family, and being aware, excuse me, being aware of their literacy level or close to where they're at with the language they're receiving the message in, whether that is English or their preferred language, will help you know how to compose that message. Now, that seems like a lot of work, figuring out what literacy level every single parent is on, every single contact, and trying to compose your message properly to make sure that it's understandable for every single family. That's why Talking Points has built-in tools that will kind of correct for that in order to help you send understandable messages to all families, regardless of literacy level. One of the things that is put in place on their Talking Points platform, we call it a readability flag. And what that is when you're typing in your message on Talking Points into the compose box, you're typing it in. If you start typing something in that's Shakespearean, say, and it is just far beyond, our threshold is about a 5th, 6th grade level, reading level, then an orange flag will pop up. And that is kind of a warning to say, hold up. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. Might be a little difficult to translate. It might get lost in translation. It might be hard for someone whose literacy level is not as high as a college graduate or even a high school graduate. And so staying aware of that and keeping each of your messages at a lower literacy level with those shorter sentences, and just writing the way that you would very simply in a text message. It's just that little warning, that alert to remind you, keep it simple, to keep it simple for anyone to be able to understand what's being sent through, whether it translates or not. Because honestly, if we are honest with ourselves, we'll remember that a lot of adults in the US, born and raised here, who speak English still don't have high school level or above literacy level. So reading those text messages that come through, even in English, might be difficult. So keeping that in mind is important when thinking about writing the right message and understandability. I'm dropping another link into the chat, and this is our most popular blog ever. This blog gets the most views every single year, all the time, and that's because when that flag pops up, when you're typing out a message that might be too difficult, and I'll pull that up and show you how that works in the app in a few minutes, but when that pops up, this blog is linked. It tells you, if you click on the flag, it tells you why the flag appeared, And then it links you to this blog that walks you through some of the tips on how to write a simpler message that still gets all of your meaning across, but that will translate well, that will make the most sense to the most number of people, that will stay at an appropriate literacy level. And it just keeps those tips in mind so that you can start to internalize how you write the best message for the most number of people. So it's a great one to have bookmarked, but if you forget to, it will pop up for you in the app when you need it. So next, the third thing to keep in mind when thinking about understandability is speech and audio options. So even if someone is very literate, or even if literacy is an issue with families, they might need the option to hear the message that has been sent to them. They might need the option to speak their response message into their phone. It might be an issue with typing out. It might be an issue with how large or small the text is. Whatever the issue is, speech and audio options solve for a lot of them. And so families who use the Talking Points for Families application have the option to do speech to text and text to speech to solve for a lot of those issues. So if once you've written out that great message that you know is going to be translated well, and you know it's going to go out to all of your families, understand that your families with the Talking Points for Families app will be able to listen to it and respond by speaking if those are the options that they want to use. If you have families using regular text message, a lot of phones have this option as well. It's just with text, we don't have control over which phones have that option and which do not. So some of these features are available on the Talking Points for Families app. And so recommending that app download for certain families who may need this additional help is highly recommended. So another important topic under understandability is the terminology that we use when we are creating our message. And this feels like a long list and a lot of things to think about when writing a simple text message, but these things will start to be second nature. So terminology, I know as a former teacher, would throw around all these acronyms that anyone outside of the day-to-day classroom wouldn't know what I was talking about, because these are acronyms that we use day to day as teachers, but other people aren't familiar with. The acronyms, the jargon, and all of these words that someone has to be trained to understand. And that is no one's fault, but it is a responsibility of an educator to know, okay, I either need to explain these words or not use them. But here's what Talking Points has done. To save you time and to keep you from having to think about using these terms all the time, we have added in a special feature again on the Talking Points for Families app called Ed 101. And what it does is if a family receives a message with a term like IEP, assessment, field trip even, any of these terms that not only someone outside of education may not be familiar with, but think about the families who just arrived in the US and are trying to keep up with their kids' schedule and what's going on in their life, but they don't know what the US schools are even like. If one of those words comes through in a message, it'll be highlighted to where they can tap on it and see a very simplified definition. Again, to focus on literacy level, we've written it at a 5th grade or below literacy level for them to understand. And what that does is being able to define those terms within the conversation is it keeps family members from having to interrupt the conversation to ask a question that might feel embarrassing, even though it's not. It's not embarrassing not to know, but they may not feel comfortable asking, and being able to tap and read the definition and continue the conversation is so empowering, and it allows those adults in their kids' educational journey to learn with them how that process works. So not only is Talking Points connecting families with educators in the day-to-day, but we're educating families on how that process works so they can fully be engaged in their kids' educational process. And I think that's beautiful. So terminology is one. And the last element of understandability that is important to remember is tone. And I think that one's fairly obvious, but I know that teaching is a very stressful job. I've been there. I've done that. And especially when texting is that readily available mode of communication, it can be easy to send a very quick, snappy response to something. And it can be very easy to not not quite understand what the tone was that was intended in a message. So considering additional clarifying words in messages and things like that is highly important, especially when speaking to families, and thinking, okay, there could be a lot of elements outside of the relationship I have with the family that could play into their perception of school, perception of education as a whole. They might already be frustrated with what's going on, and the messages I send will play into that. So, and ways to work with that are also in the blog that I linked earlier. So highly recommend bookmarking that blog post, taking a read through it. It's very, very quick, to just help understand how to write those really quick text messages where they will work for you. And those are just the quick notes on understandability. So until I get some FAQs coming in, I am going to show you in the Talking Points platform some of these cool features that specifically help with composing a really good message and with understandability. So let me pull up my Talking Points account really quick. I'm going to take a sip of water because talking fast. Oh, splash myself in the face. All right. Let's see. Appreciate your patience. And if you do have a question, throw it in the chat and I will get to you before I share. Okay. So here is my account. And this is what an account looks like for a teacher in a paid account with their district or their school. But the tools that I talk about, I'll let you know if one is specifically for a paid account or if it's available for teachers using the free account as well. So one of the tools that will help with understandability is the readability flag that I mentioned. That's available for everyone. So let's say I'm writing a message and I get very carried away with my fancy language. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? I don't remember the rest of this quote, but let's say, I'm going to think of some really big words. Okay, so I've used a whole bunch of big words, some wording that's kind of heavy. So what it's done is it's popped up this orange flag. It's called the readability flag. And it's telling me that my families have differing literacy levels. I need to simplify my message to improve translation and understandability for more of my families. Now, it doesn't require that I do those things. If I'm comfortable with the message I've written, I can go ahead and send it along, but this is just a helpful tip. And this writing for translation will link to that blog post that I was telling you about before. If you're not a fan of this flag popping up, you can always tell it not to do it again. I think it's a super helpful tool for writing messages that you know everyone's going to understand. That tool is available for everybody. The next one is called Message Mentor. This one's going to help a lot with tone, with maybe you're frustrated with a child or a student or even a family, but you do need to communicate with them. You need to engage with them, and you need some help how to say it positively. So I'm going to say, Tyler was being really mean today. I just don't know what to do anymore. Now, that is absolutely not a message I would want to send to a family. It sounds like I'm giving up, kind of calling the kid mean instead of saying specifically what he did. The family's not going to even know what they're supposed to do about it, but it is maybe how I feel. So instead of sending that, I'm going to click the Message Mentor button, and it's going to revise my message. And let's see what it comes up with. Hi, parent. Tyler was unkind to other students today. This affects how well everyone can learn. Could you please talk with Tyler about being respectful? Your support is always appreciated. Thank you. Now, it wrote it in kind of a letter format. I can remove best and my signature. That's kind of fancy, but I think that sounds a lot better than what I said. So I'm going to edit that. And I think I would probably send that along because that gets across my point. It gives them something they can do about it, and it's a little more specific. So Message Mentor, this little sparkle button down here, that helps with tone especially, and that is available for teachers on the paid accounts with their schools and districts. Highly, highly recommend you utilize that one and play with that one. So let's look at a couple of other ones. Again, if you have any questions, throw those in the chat before we hit the half hour, and I can address those while I'm looking in my account. Another tool that will help with understandability and simply help with what to share with families is another tool that's specifically in the paid accounts for schools and districts are these best practice tips of the week. So this week it is about encouraging families to make sure they can access their students' academic information. So it'll give you a fun tip, something specific to message families about, and then you just click send a message and it brings it up, sometimes with a template that's already written for you. So here it is. It says to log into the student portal. You can adjust that for whatever your school uses. Read through it, make sure it's accurate and appropriate. You can change things around and then send it to whomever you'd want to. We're really trying to provide these helpful tips that are positive. They are productive for families to have something to do with their student, with their child at home that is directly related to their success and engaging with you. So the best practice tips of the week are very helpful in that way. And then you can mark it as completed if you've done it. So those are probably the best tools I can share with you around messaging and understandability. And so I'm going to give you your challenge before any more questions come through. And your challenge is to read this blog post that I've shared. I want you to either bookmark it or read it today. It is very helpful. It will give you some really good tips on what to write in a message, what not to write, how to keep those sentences short while maintaining your meaning and making sure it's going to translate well for everyone. And I do promise it is a very helpful article, even if you're not using translation as much and you're just messaging to families in English. It's still very helpful because you do have that 600 character limit and you need to fit helpful and important information into that short message. So highly recommend reading that blog post, maybe sharing it with your teammates who also use talking points to make sure best practices are being used and we're making the most of each message, each announcement that goes out, because we don't want any messages to be overlooked because they're just kind of unimportant. We want to make sure it's important information that's going out in each message and that families can understand it and engage with it. So that is your challenge for the week. I have about 5 more minutes that I can stay if anyone else has any more questions to add. Thank you, and thank you for joining. Check the comments for the link to that blog. Good to see you too. Thank you. And if you have any tips on how you've been able to write good messages that have gone through really well and been understood, we love to share those with each other. We love to see educators sharing tips with each other. And I'm going to share one more link in the chat because we have a Facebook group that's specifically for teachers to engage with each other, share tips, things like that. So I'm going to link to that in the comments as well. It's our TP online community. So join us there if you ever want to ask a question or get some advice from other teachers, or you sent a really cool poll and you think other teachers could benefit from seeing that template. All about building community. And with that, if there are no more questions, we will be back next Thursday, same time, same place, 4:30 Central, Facebook and YouTube. And I'm going to look and see if I can tell you what. Oh, sorry. Next Thursday, we do not have a session. I will be out, but it is the following Thursday. We do have a session, and it will be celebrating engagement successes. So we'll be talking about celebrating on October 3rd. So I will see you then. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.